How long have you been looking for the thing that ends the looking? There's a question behind why you're here, not the one in the title, the quieter one. Maybe you've been at this for a while now. Maybe you've heard the instruction more times than you can count. Turn attention inward. Follow the eye back to its source. Ask who you are. So you try. You sit. You ask. And then you wait. And while you're waiting, there's something watching the waiting. Something noticing that the silence isn't quite silent. Something keeping score. That something never really rests. Even between moments of practice, it's there, a quiet manager, checking, measuring, getting slightly uneasy when nothing shifts, feeling a small relief when something does, and then immediately wondering if that relief was real or just another thing passing through. Here's what's strange. The more sincere the seeking, the more vigilant that manager becomes. Devotion doesn't dissolve it. More practice doesn't dissolve it. If anything, it grows more refined, more sophisticated in its watching, which raises something uncomfortable. What if that manager, the one who has been running every inquiry, every sincere attempt to arrive, is not the seeker getting closer? Ramana Maharshi spent his life pointing at one specific effort, something most practitioners never actually make, because it dissolves the one who would make it. Ramana Maharshi was 16 when he lay down on the floor of his uncle's house and decided to find out what dies. He wasn't a monk. He hadn't studied philosophy. He simply held himself still, stopped resisting, and let the fear of death move through him completely while watching. He wasn't watching from a safe distance. He was the thing being watched. What he found wasn't peace, or rather, what he found was that the one who had been afraid had no substance. The body was there. The fear was there. But the eye that was supposed to be dying, when he looked directly at it, wasn't where he thought it was. He never recovered from that. He left his family without much explanation and walked to a mountain he had never seen but somehow recognized. For years, he sat, absorbed in something that had no name, that needed no practice, that wasn't going anywhere because it had never left. People came from everywhere, some with questions, some with suffering, some simply because something in them recognized a quality of stillness that no amount of seeking had produced. And when they asked how do I get there? What is the method? What do I do? He returned to the same place every time. The question, who am I, is not meant to be answered by the mind. It is a tool to turn the mind back on itself, not a mantra, not a concentration practice, a single movement of attention, away from every object, every experience, every thought passing through, and toward the source from which the sense of I arises. He called it Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, and he was particular about what it actually is, something stranger than analysis, stranger than self-knowledge in the usual sense. You take the feeling of I, that quiet, persistent sense of being a someone, and instead of following it outward into thought and reaction and story, you follow it inward. Where does this come from? What is its source? You stay with that as a direction rather than a question. the way you'd follow a thread, not to understand it, but to find where it begins. Most people who try this think they're doing it, and for a while, that's enough. Here is what actually happens when you follow the eye inward. For a moment, sometimes just a fraction of a second, the mind loses its object. There's nothing to hold on to. The thought you are following dissolves before it arrives anywhere. And in that dissolution, something goes quiet, not the quiet you were trying to produce. A quiet that was already there before you started looking for it. And then the manager wakes up. Was that it? Should I go back? How do I stay there? And just like that, you're looking again. This is the loop Ramana saw so clearly. The inquiry begins as a genuine movement inward. But somewhere along the way, usually very quickly, it gets picked up by the same mechanism that runs everything else. The same voice that monitors the meditation starts monitoring the inquiry. The same hand that reached for every other spiritual experience reaches for this one too, and the reaching is the problem, or maybe not a problem exactly, more like a pattern that's been running so long it feels like the only way to move. The mind turned inward is the self. Turned outward, it becomes the ego and the world. There's something in that sentence the mind will immediately try to use as instruction. Turn inward. Got it. And then it turns and watches itself turning and wonders if it's doing it right. But that's not what he meant. Turned inward doesn't mean redirected. It means something closer to dissolved. The mind following the eye back to its source isn't a mind that arrives somewhere new. It's a mind that runs out of ground. This is the part nobody really warns you about. The inquiry, done honestly, without the manager running it, starts to destabilize the very thing that's doing the inquiring. You follow the sense of I inward, and at some point you can't find the one who was following. The thread leads back to something that isn't a thing, a space that's aware but has no edges, no history, no next move, and the mind doesn't know what to do with that. Or maybe it does. Maybe what it does is exactly what it always does. It turns the dissolution into an experience, files it, references it later. There was this moment in practice where everything went quiet, and now that moment is another object, another landmark on a map of a journey that was never a journey. Ramana was quiet about many things, but about this he was direct. Realization is not something to be acquired. It is already there. What is required is the removal of the idea that it has not been realized. So, the effort has a different shape than expected, less like reaching, more like noticing what the reaching has been hiding. The quiet assumption running beneath every practice that what you're looking for is somewhere other than exactly here. That assumption is what the manager lives on. It's the only food it has. And when you see that, really see it here, in this moment, in the act of listening, and already waiting for what comes next. Something shifts, quietly, without announcement. The inquiry doesn't end, but the one who needed it to end somewhere is a little harder to find. And yet, here you are, still listening. At some point, this video will end, And something in you is already preparing for that, already deciding what to do with what was said here. Whether it was useful, whether it changed anything, whether to sit quietly for a while or move on to the next thing. That quiet forward motion, so ordinary it's almost invisible. Ramana left Arunachala only twice in his entire life. Both times he came back the same day. People around him assumed there was a reason, a teaching in it, something to understand. But when asked, he had very little to say. There was simply nothing pulling him anywhere. The mountain wasn't a place he had chosen to stay. It was what remained when the movement stopped. Most of us have never felt that, or maybe we've felt something like it, briefly. A morning where nothing needed to happen yet. A moment between sleeping and waking where the manager hadn't clocked in. A few seconds of just this, without the weight of what it means or where it leads. Those moments don't feel like enlightenment. They feel like nothing in particular, and that's exactly why they get ignored. The only effort that ends seeking is not something you schedule. It happens in the gap between one reach and the next, a noticing, quiet, almost accidental, that the one who has been doing all this work is itself the restlessness it was trying to cure. I honestly don't know what to do with that. Some days it feels like the most freeing thing imaginable. Other days, it just sits there, unresolved, slightly uncomfortable. Maybe that's what it's supposed to feel like. Somewhere right now, someone is sitting with their eyes closed, waiting for silence to arrive. And the silence is already there, has been there the whole time. Patient, unmoving, completely unimpressed by the search, waiting for the seeker to get tired enough to stop. Just for a moment, just long enough to notice what was never missing. If something in this landed somewhere real, somewhere beyond just interesting, we'd love to know. What is it that you're still reaching for, even now? And if you want to stay with these teachings, there's more here when you're ready.